What up? Golden Era Podcast. Welcome in. We are recording this just after the NBA trade deadline. Again, not a very active one. Not really worth diving into all that, to be honest with you. We've done a little bit of the Miami, the New York conversation already. So instead, as we approach the NBA All-Star break, not really, but kind of really the halfway point of the NBA season, or at least the pole in the ground point of the season, is the perfect time for us to do top 10 contenders in the NBA. I think this is a little bit deeper than it was a year ago, where I had 8 teams that I thought could win an NBA championship. This year, I think there's probably 10 teams with a couple on the outside. The way we'll do it, we'll go 10 to 1. We'll give the honorable mentions after that's all said and done. So, first off, number 10 in our top 10 power rankings, that's going to be the Orlando Magic. This is a team that made it to the NBA Finals the last 2 seasons. They're 34-19, 5th in the Eastern Conference, 7th ranked offense, 10th ranked defense. What's been good? They've been here. We mentioned it. 2 trips, NBA Finals. Trey Hunter is still elite. Jalen Green has maybe been their best player of the season. 26 points, 9 boards, 6 assists. Hunter is kind of the legacy selection on like who's their top guy, but Jalen Green has been absolutely phenomenal. And then Corey Flynn has anchored their second unit. He's averaging 18.1 points per game off the bench. He's a favorite for 6th man. They got him at last year's trade deadline from the Miami Heat. Those 3 guys on offense really bolster a group that's doing a lot of great things. Meanwhile, the bad. What has happened to Jason Tatum? 33.5% from deep. He was 44% last season. 44.5% from the floor. He was 50 last season. He's at his age 35 season. He's scoring 15 points, which is 7 fewer than last season. Meanwhile, Elton Dawkins, the big center acquisition they got a couple seasons ago, that's really what bumped them into the NBA Finals conversation. He's got fewer points, fewer rebounds than last season, and he's got the same number of minutes. Meanwhile, opponents are shooting 64% at the rim. And you look at this group, you only feel confident about 6 of their rotation guys, and that includes Tatum and Dawkins, who have not been awesome, as we mentioned. So what are we going to get from this group? That's tough to tell, but it's very much a group kind of like the 90s Utah Jazz, where they've been here. They've done this before. You have confidence that they can continue to do it. Moving on. Number 9, Oklahoma City Thunder. They're 34-21, 4th in the Western Conference. 15th ranked offense, but the 3rd ranked defense. The good. Their defense. It's been elite all season long, and that's despite the fact that Tobias Bell is an absolute weak spot at the point guard position on defense. It's why there was so much skepticism about him and CJ McCoy playing together in Indiana. Meanwhile, Tobias Bell, even with a cold streak, has erupted as the number 1 guy. That, I don't think, is a massive shock, but he's been that. He's been much better than maybe anyone expected, but to be at the level that he's been, even with this recent cold streak off that red-hot start, is still phenomenal. Michael Chasen can be a viable number 2 option, even though he's coming off the bench. He's their second leading scorer. He's getting about 26, 27 minutes per game. He's very much capable of being a secondary guy. And the addition of SGA, I really like. It gives them 2 guys at most every position outside of power forward that you have to feel pretty good about. Meanwhile, the bad. What happens if their offense with Bell is not going? Noja Sesnoskis was an all-star 2 seasons ago. He is not this season. He is a good scorer, Sesnoskis, but he has not been as demonstrative on ball. Tobias Bell has really been the only reason this offense is ranked 15th in the league. If he is not going, that's a problem. Meanwhile, we mentioned it. Bell is a weak spot at point guard. They've somehow covered it up. The offenses, meanwhile, in the playoffs, I'm saying meanwhile a lot. We got to cut that one out. Offenses in the playoffs, I kind of feel like the side note, the apparently guy, the little kid, that's what I'm saying. Meanwhile, offenses in the playoffs have obviously going to be very much focused on Tobias Bell. So, what are they going to do on defense if Tobias Bell continues to get exploited, which he was in the conference semifinals against Orlando last season? Number 8. The old team, Indiana Pacers, 35-20. They're 4th in the Eastern Conference, 4th ranked offense, 17th ranked defense. The irony of this whole thing is that they are kind of the polar opposite, almost exactly, of Oklahoma City. The good. When they are healthy, they were the best team in basketball. They have a massively deep roster. They've probably got 8 or 9 guys that can be relied upon in a rotation, playoff rotation. Their go-to guy has obviously been C.J. McCoy, but they've got a handful of guys behind him. Hello, Nico Harrington, who continues to resurrect his career. Ibrahim Mobley when healthy. Those guys might not be all-stars, but they're really, really good basketball players. The bad. Let's just first just get the most obvious point out the room. McCoy and Mobley are both out. They're missing 2 of their 5 starters. McCoy's going to be out for at least another 2 months. Mobley another month. Without them, they have been plummeting. It's why they're sitting at 8 and not a top 14, which is where I think they were. At the same time, their defense is not good. Even with this Humpty Dumpty put-together group, this defense was not good. Why? Because C.J. McCoy, like Tobias Bell, is a negative on the defensive end. They found a way to cover it up in Oklahoma City. They haven't in Indiana. Nico Harrington, Ibrahim Mobley, Caden Dickerson, those guys are good defenders, but they have not been the type of group that Oklahoma City has been for some reason. Moving on, number 7. We're not skipping around. Phoenix Suns, 32-22, 6th in the East, 5th ranked offense, 7th ranked defense. Why are they not higher? We'll get to that, but let's start with the good. Jacoby Cleaves, he's playing like an MVP again. 30 points per game. With the injury to Amari Swift and Brighton Reed, Jacoby Cleaves might actually get an MVP. I don't know that he quite deserves it. I think there's probably better stories, even though it's not always the MVP, but it still is the MVP award. There's better stories, there's better players higher up in the standings, but they've been awesome as of late. They've been racing out of the play-in, well above 500 now. This is the highest they've been above 500 all season long. Meanwhile, we get another one in there. Cade Cunningham has really impressed in February. 29 points per game this month. In his age 31 season, he's shooting 56 from the floor, 44% from deep. Those are great numbers. Carson Hughes was phenomenal in January, averaging 18. That gives them 4 guys who can flirt with or surpass 20. You're saying who's the 4th? We'll get to him. Carson Hughes is their lone weak spot on defense. That's a positive. He's not quite as C.J. McCoy bad on defense, but he's not quite Tobias Bell mediocre, and Tobias Bell is not even mediocre on defense. But Jacoby Cleaves, Cade Cunningham, and Malik Hightower are a 3-man group that's probably unmatched in terms of wing switchability. The bad. Malik Hightower. He's been quietly awful on offense despite scoring 40 or 20 points per game. He's shooting just 41% from the floor. They have no depth. They're relying on a 31-year-old Jaden Springer, which is fine, and a 32-year-old Anthony Edwards, who, again, when he was back in his Charlotte days, to give you the quick reminder of his career, drafted by Golden State, traded to Charlotte, goes to New Orleans. Now he's in Phoenix. Tore his Achilles when he was with the Hornets. That sapped him of some of that athleticism. He was a league leader in score, a third-team All-NBA guy when he was there. But those are their best 2 bench options. Quite literally it. Those guys are fine if they're the 8th and 9th guys. Instead, they're 6 and 7. What version of them are we going to get? We said they could be higher because they've been really bad. They were very bad early in the season figuring out this new roster, but they've been great as of late. So are we getting the recent one or the original version of the Phoenix Suns? Okay, number 6. Milwaukee Bucks, 37-19, they're 3rd in the Eastern Conference, 9th ranked offense, 12th ranked defense. The good Qualls has finally got a second option in Luka Doncic. They've both looked really great this season. Jules Petrus has been much improved, and he's even starting to rebound. 5 rebounds in January, 4.5 in February. He was getting 2 earlier in the season. They've got good switchable defenders, Marcus Young Jr., Adrian Harper, Dwayne Qualls. Those are all really good pieces that you've got at each level of the defense. They've got good shooting. Dwayne Qualls, Doncic, D'Angelo Dyson, 44%. Mario Zoric, 39% as the center position. They have good secondary depth. They have 7 guys who could all probably be considered a starter. The bad, they don't have a great mid-tier guy, right? The type of Rashawn Matthews, Louis Morgan level, if we're talking Brooklyn, if we're talking Phoenix, the Carson Hughes, Malik Hightower, the guy that's not quite an elite all-star, but he's not a bench guy, just sits there in the starter level. I don't know if they've really got that. Petrus has been better, but their 3rd best guy for both Brooklyn and Boston, if you look in the Eastern Conference, is better. Their wing rotation is weak. Their best depth is at the center position. Mario Zoric, Adrian Harper, Jules Petrus can slide up there. Their wing depth and wing rotation is really suspect. It's Petrus, it's Marcus Young, it's D'Angelo Dyson, it's Luka Doncic. That's not bad, but it's not great when the rotations get even slimmer and the games get more intense in the playoffs. Top 5 we go. Number 5, Utah Jazz. They're 39-18. They're number 2 in the Western Conference. I feel like this is kind of flown under the radar. They've got the 6th ranked offense, 18th ranked defense. The record with Julius Walker. When he has been on the floor, they have been an absolutely different basketball team. He anchors their defense. Opponents are shooting sub 50% inside the paint against him. Darius Dixon probably was the MVP last season until he sprains his ankle about this time. This is the final 6 weeks of the season. He's continued to be that. Their starting 5 has very few weaknesses. Jacob Cuxix, Darius Dixon, Patrick Morris Sr., Spiro Yanu, and then Julius Walker. Cuxix is still very good at point guard. He's 31. He's not quite an all-star. He's sub 20 points per game scorer. He was an all-star last season. He's still very good even if he's not at that peak level. And again, they've got really great depth. I think they probably go 8 or 9 deep with veterans that have been there. The bad. If somebody stuffs out Darius Dixon, what's going to happen? We saw this happen with Portland last season. The Suns just went all out to slow down Savion White. They ended up sweeping him in that one. Can Patrick Morris or Jacob Cuxix elevate to that level? They did last season, right? Patrick Morris hit the game winner in Game 6 against Golden State to force a Game 7, but an older Jacob Cuxix, are we going to get that out of him? 1 year isn't too much, but it's still something. Patrick Morris Sr. hasn't shown to be an on-ball creator. Meanwhile, the big, obvious point here, 18th ranked defense. Are they really going to win a championship with an 18th ranked defense? I don't have the numbers of the rankings of the last handful of champions, but normally you're looking at needing to be a top 15, top 12, top 10 if you can be defense, and Utah is pretty far away from that. Number 4, Boston Celtics, 37-19. They're second in the Eastern Conference, 12th ranked offense, 11th ranked defense. Despite being without Amari Swift is the number 1 good for this team. He's been the best player in the league this season, and without him, Xavier Carter has been out of his mind. They make up the best wing front court rotation, or duo rather, in the NBA. The addition of Brandon Ingram replenishes their depth at the wing. That's been 2 years in the making since they emptied it to get Kareem Robinson, and then he bolted for the Lakers. Latrell Appling is a really good point guard. Even if he's a really bad defender, he can score a lot. They've got 3 guys that can be putting up 20 points per game. And they've got a handful of two-way weapons now. Appling is fine. Tyrese Halliburton, Amari Swift, Xavier Carter, Brandon Ingram, Tyrell Kemp. This is a really good rotation now. Javon Shumpert. This is a really good rotation with a lot of good pieces. The bad. Appling is still a negative on defense. He got exposed in the Magic Warriors NBA Finals. The Warriors relentlessly went after him with Javon Roll and Jonathan Kuminga. That is definitely going to happen again for Boston. They've got to find a way to cover that up. I think they can with Swift and Carter, but they still got to do it. And they've dealt with injuries to their top 3 guys. Appling missed time early. Swift is obviously out now. Carter has been out. If Swift or Carter is out, they're done. They're not making a run. And remember, this is Carter missing time now for the 2nd straight season, although Swift was healthy for almost all of it a year ago. Number 3, we move. Brooklyn Nets, 40-16. They're the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference. 3rd ranked offense, 13th ranked defense. This feels like a huge come around for me a couple podcasts ago saying, hey, maybe do they need to tear it down? Do you trade Louis Morgan? You absolutely don't need to trade Louis Morgan because he has been absolutely phenomenal without Brighton Reed in the offense. That's where we'll start with the good. When they have been healthy, outside of those struggles, because remember, they lost Louis Morgan right away in the regular season. Brighton Reed has to take over. They struggle a little bit for 4 games with Louis Morgan back. Then they started rolling with those 2 guys on the floor. When they have been healthy, they've been absolutely elite, although they've pretty much been missing at least one of their top 3 guys all season long. Reed was an MVP contender, and they're figuring out that Reed-Morgan balance just before the knee injury to Brighton Reed. They just added Sasha Kasparov, which means they might be able to swing Rashawn Matthews to the 4, which has kind of been their biggest weak point in that starting 5. I've always wanted Rashawn Matthews to be a stretch 5. I think that's kind of where he fits next to a 4 that's a stretch 4 that can shoot the ball, kind of an Al Horford type of piece, although he's much better than Al Horford, or maybe if you like the prime all-star version of Al Horford. They just haven't gotten much out of Saddiq Bey, though, so I would expect them to maybe start Kasparov at the 5, play Matthews at the 4, which is, by the way, going to be a phenomenal front court defensively. Rashawn Matthews has been leading the league in rebounding all season long. You add Sasha Kasparov, there's just not going to be a lot of second chance points. And if they're able to get Memphis Reed back in the playoffs, their depth is going to get a lot better. And it's very notable. He has the knee injury at the beginning of the season. They never ruled him out. They said he's out 8 to 10 months. Just maybe in time to get back to the playoffs. We'll see about it. I'd be skeptical, but if he comes back and he looks even remotely competent, they've got a really good rotation right now. The bad, they haven't stayed healthy. We talked about pretty much missing every single one of their starters. And if they play one of their guys, one of their valuable Bryton Reed, Louis Morgan, Rashawn Matthews, and now insert Sasha Kasparov in Game 82, even if seeding is on the line, they are asking for the basketball gods' wrath because they have been injured in the last 2 Game 82s. Do not play anybody, Brooklyn, in Game 82. Take the loss. Who cares? Don't do it. Don't tempt us with this so that we have to talk about it for another season. And they're small. Bryton Reed is 6'4". Alphonso Gaines is 6'4". The East isn't huge. Chicago starts a pair of 6'4" guys too. Jalen Green, he's a skinny 6'6", but they are going to get battered from switches, particularly against teams like Boston, like Brooklyn, or excuse me, like Milwaukee, where you can put Luka Doncic on a 6'4" guy, where you can switch Amari Swift onto somebody. It's not ideal for Brooklyn in that backcourt. Number 2, Sacramento. They're 35-12, the third-place team in the Western Conference, 10th ranked offense, 8th ranked defense. Why are they higher than Utah? Because I think this is a team, and we'll get to it on the bad side, they've been unhealthy most of the season, but my God, do they look good. Their top 3-4 isn't quite as great as Golden State, which I think we can probably assume where they're going to end up on this, but it's close. Tyrese Alston is my MVP right now. He's been out of his mind. Jason Sanders is still all NBA. His numbers have come down, but that's because he's sharing the ball with multiple guys. R.J. Wallace, defending Defensive Player of the Year. Parker Pollard, meanwhile, is a 20-plus point per game guy. They are very good in their top 4. You add in Isaac Okoro, and that's a starting 5 that will give Golden State fits. And we saw that in their game in Sacramento, even without Jason Sanders. A top 5 that goes very strong. They have depths, and they addressed that with their big issue, which was a backup point guard at the trade deadline by getting Parker Ellis. I said it, I don't know that there's a better starting 5 right now. All of them are either very good to elite defenders. Okoro is elite. Obviously, R.J. Wallace is elite. Okoro is not so subtly a 40% three-point shooter. Their top 3 scorers can get whatever they want. In terms of a guy or a team that has 3 guys that can go out and score at will, I don't think that there's anyone else besides Golden State has 3 guys that can do it the way Sacramento can, and their switchability is unmatched. We mentioned the Suns, but I'll probably put Pollard, Okoro, and Sanders in that realm. I think those 3 are probably as good, if not a little bit better, because Cade Cunningham isn't an elite defender. The bad. Will they be healthy? This is literally an argument for every team, but when you look at the groups that have not been healthy, that's when you start to bring it up. Like Golden State, are they going to be healthy? Well, we don't know, but they have been healthy this entire season. They don't have a track record. We're now picking up track records here for Sacramento. And is Sanders' lower scoring numbers him regressing or just Olsen taking over? My vote is the latter. He's only 29. I don't think Jason Sanders is suddenly not an elite basketball player, but he's only scoring 23 points per game. I would expect him to turn that around when he gets to the NBA Finals. And then the number 1 ranked team, no surprise here, Golden State. They're 43-12. They're the number 1 team in the Western Conference and in the NBA. They have the first ranked offense, the second ranked defense. They have the best 3 players on any team in the league, 1, 2, 3, with Kuminga, Roll, and Deontay Dixon. Roll and Dixon could put up huge numbers like Alston, like Swift, like Jalen Justice, like Jacoby Cleaves if they played alone. They don't. That's fine for Golden State. Kuminga, he's probably going to slip into a third-team All-NBA. He's averaging 25 points per game. He's actually been really good this season. 3 All-NBA guys. Very few other teams are going to be able to boast that, if any. Their depth is starting to come around. They've really leaned into this rookie young player movement. Jalen House has been starting for the majority of the season now. He's a legit 40% three-point shooter. Jalen Trimble in his 3rd season is a good forward. Aiden Lucas at 7'8" is quite literally unstoppable, but he just cannot last more than 3 to 4 minutes at a time. And then Branko Todorovic has really kind of grabbed the bull by the horns as the backup point guard. There's a sense that maybe Briggs and Granger aren't the best pieces, personally, off the bench, something that we didn't think at the start of the year. We kind of expected the Warriors to lean on them heavily. The bad, their bench is still young. Even in the early years of Darius Dixon, Patrick Morris Sr., and Jalen Blackman, they had veterans on the roster, and they didn't even win the title in their rookie season. That was a really great draft class for the Warriors. It built the 76-win team a couple years later, but the 3 guys that we just talked about, Jalen House, Aiden Lucas, Branko Todorovic, all of them are rookies. Their vets are creaky and inconsistent. Granger is rounding into form at 40%, but he's not a great defender anymore as he was before. Briggs always was a great downhill pick-and-roll threat. He doesn't have that same athleticism. And they're small in the backcourt. This is what plagued the Warriors when they went with the Javon Roll, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Jalen Suggs backcourt. They did Suggs and Roll for a season. They did the three of them for a season. They did SGA and Javon Roll for a season. It didn't work out. They didn't win a championship. This was not a good basketball team because they got exposed on the defensive end, which forced them to trade SGA to the Pacers to get Deontay Dixon. They signed Shane Ruffin, and they rebuilt that team. They are starting 2 6'4" guards. We'll see if they decide to go to that in the NBA playoffs. All right, a couple honorable mentions just to throw them out there. The Bulls, they're 34-19. They're 6th in the East, second-ranked offense, but 22nd-ranked defense. Javon Stokes is phenomenal. Their offense is great, but their defense sucks, and they're young. It's not a recipe for postseason success. The Miami Heat, 31-25, 7th in the Eastern Conference. First-ranked defense, 22nd ranked offense. I don't know how a John Morant-led offense is 22nd. They went all in on vets. Morant's now out. The Raptors, 29-28, 8th in the Eastern Conference. Somehow mediocre. 16th ranked offense, 17th ranked defense. I wanted to put them in the top 10 purely because of Jalen Justice, but there just isn't a big enough body of work. They've been either unhealthy or suspended in Ezekiel Morrow's situation. And then the Timberwolves, I don't believe, can win it. They've had a good season. They're 5th, but they don't have another piece outside of Bees Ojale. Portland is now without Savion White. We mentioned that on the league update. They somehow have the 21st ranked defense, despite Savion White leading the league in steals and being an elite defender. And the Lakers just have not looked the same since last season. The addition of Ian Bledsoe at the deadline, I like it. It's a good one. But still, 20th ranked defense, 17th ranked offense. Count me out on those. All right, thanks for tuning in. We got 2 broadcast games coming up, Golden State, Toronto, and then Utah and Washington. Both of those broadcasts coming back with a league update after that. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for sticking with us.